Hi, guys. Welcome to another edition of The Big Shift, where we take exceptional people on their exceptional journeys and we unlock what is exceptional about these guys and the highs and lows of a wonderful, exceptional journey. Today, I have a wonderful guest. He's an ex-Royal Marine Commando. He's an international best-selling author. He has some real tales to tell. He has some unbelievable stories. He's a good friend of mine. It's with great pleasure I introduce Chris Thrall. How are you, Chris?
Stevie, I'm wonderful, mate. Thank you. It's good to chat again.
It is. Now, look, for people who don't know you, you've met unbelievable people. I'm talking about the real SAS guys, the SBS guys, really elite specialist, special forces guys. You've got an unbelievable story of yourself. But for those who don't know you out there, Chris, the viewers, just give people 5 minutes on your upbringing, where you was born and that kind of stuff.
Oh, gosh. Right. Okay. So I was actually born in Bromley, which is southeast London, right? But I moved down to the southwest of England as a nipper. I had the archetypal rough childhood. I think you get me there. We don't need to say anything more about that, but wasn't very nice at times. And as a result, I ended up joining the Marines for a bet when I was 18. I was homeless, living in my car, and my mate Dan, it's not his real name, but that's what his name is in my books. I just joined the Royal Marines. You couldn't do it. So I said, I freaking could. And that was it. I went on what they call it's now called the PRMC, Potential Royal Marines course. Back in the day, it was called the PRC, the Potential Recruits course. And it's basically 3 days. We go to Lympstone Commando, which is the Royal Marines Training Centre, and they beast you for over all the endurance course, the assault course.
Let me come in there, Chris. For people who don't know this, by beasting, we mean the real pressure. I mean, beyond pressure, mental, physical, emotional, even spiritual, right? Pushed and pulled beyond what is possible and endurance, right?
Yeah, beasting, we use that term a bit flippantly as Marines, but what it actually is, it's a strategy that the Marines use in training to put you under severe physical punishment. I won't even pretend I know why, Steve. I mean, I do know why, but it's just hard to explain. But when you go into combat or war, or Northern Ireland conflict I served in, it's not going to be pleasant. Men killing each other, men and women killing men and women. It's not something we should be aspiring to as a race, right? And by race, I mean the human race. And in order to get people to, perform under these kind of circumstances, they use this thing called beasting when you're in training, and they're just trying to smash you. They're trying to weed out the ones that this isn't really for. They're trying to get you to second guess yourself and think, maybe this isn't for me.
I mean, Chrissy, in a way, if I can just say that, I mean, I get it, whichever kind of side that you're on. But what I've learned as well, for the human condition, for instance, even in business, Chris, what I've learned to do, you know my journey. You've interviewed me, a lot of adversity and trauma. But when we forge ourselves, as we do as human beings, especially in business, it's about the real stuff. People are good at putting up barriers or hiding behind stuff or, whatever. So it is about pushing and pulling to certainly get them to reveal or see if certain circumstances or whatever are suited for them or where they would best be served in the kind of hierarchy of of things. Not saying it's right, but I'm saying certainly to progressive things in humanity, I've seen that part of it's right, just to see what people have in them when we're aspiring to. I mean, there are many different ways. Both of us are very, we don't believe in war, Chris. We don't believe, we also know, look, you look at history, war, it can be argued it's a necessary part of peace. We know all that, but we're saying, bottom line, we have a real experience of the trauma of what this does, and there are certainly other ways that we should go forward. But I just thought I'd come in that way. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's not just that there's other ways, Stevie, it's that the world is controlled by a bunch of sociopaths, greedy, little narcissistic. I'm saying men, it might be women as well, but they control the whole goddamn show. They control everything that we see in the media. They control all the wars, all the narratives, until we start to recognize this and stand up for ourselves and say it doesn't have to be like that, then and I'm not saying that's ever going to happen. I'm just saying, what if? Wouldn't it be a greater planet for our kids? And you can it gets really fascinating, mate, when you start to study history and you start to study the scriptures, for example. I'm not talking about religion here, I'm talking about the actual ancient documents. You go back to time immemorial, people have understood how all this works. It's no secret, right? Basically, as human beings, we're animals, right? So we have our animal qualities, but we also have something very special, is that nature has gifted this ability for self-reflection, which animals don't have, right?
Higher mind, I call it, Chris. Higher mind.
Higher mind. Whatever you want to.
We call it higher mind. It's like, and it really is. And it's like having the eagle's view sometimes, as I'll say in a meeting. Take the eagle's view. Come out of the box. Untangle yourself take an eagle's view. And, it really depends from what elevated point that you're looking at. It would be like a battle as well. That's why people take the elevated ground. Because what it is, I think one of the problems is when we think we can see everything, I always come from the standpoint is you're only wise when you know that you're not. Because you know that there's so much stuff that we don't see. And then people are making judgments without the full knowledge of what they're actually talking about. And I think this is where people are really setting themselves up for a big fail here with this, obviously, right?
Stevie, everything that we're seeing in the media now on social, it's all people caught up in a minutiae. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but it's like
can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's a herd of cattle over here, and these sociopaths, they very well know it, and all of us lot, we're picking over the bones on a carcass. We can't, we don't have the ability to look into that field there, right? And they're very clever at it, right? I call them the Babylonian money mafia, because this financial system that we all operate under, which enslaves us all from birth, if you trace back the origins, it goes back to ancient Babylon, okay? And without getting boring, or it's not boring. It's, to me, it's like, this is what life is about.
I agree. Right? And look, let's just say one of the things is, and this is important, and now we're going to, because it's very current to massive movements and transitions in the world. I'm sure everyone can identify with that. And in some way they're caught, all the misinformation. I had a solicitor on here the other day, litigation, and we was talking about free speech and where we're going and all this stuff. Very, very current. Is that, look, for me, I mean, I'm very esoteric, Chris, in the learnings and the stuff I've studied, that. But even that is not enough when you need a bigger picture. You need to understand war, politics, history, how finances work. You need to know the human condition. So you need psychology. You need other kind of elements. And when you get pieces of this together, then you start to understand the patterns you can see in the world. It's all about patterns, because they can misdirect you as much as they want. But I'm very strategic, always have been. But the difference, with me and people like us as Chris, is I can be as strong as I want with that, but behind my heart qualities are right. My heart qualities are right. I know what my end is. I know it's the lie. I've made my decision on what side of the fence I'm on. I believe in light, in goodness, to always going to win out in the end, no matter what the middle bit is, right? That's a full commitment. The rest is strategy, the middle bit. And they're the same, but their heart is different, right? So what you're seeing is the patterning, because there's patternings in strategy, even though the first rule of war is deception. For those who know, when you're looking at it closely, there are patterns. And we're seeing them all the way through here with what's going on now, which is concerning. And Chris, you have been through some unbelievable places in your time. Tell us about the Triads, because you was right in with some of them, right, and the workings of how that was. Tell us about your experiences with them.
Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'm laughing, Stevie, because it's the things life throws at you, isn't it? So after I left the Marines, I can't remember what I've told you about before, but I went out to Hong Kong to run a business that I'd started over there, and it was all going great guns. In fact, it was going massively well at one point. So I decided to get my notice in the forces. We had to do 18 months notice, and I'm going to get myself out to Hong Kong as soon as possible, because I had the kind of cliche $1 million business over there. We were turning over at one point about $100,000 a month, right, in network marketing electronic products. So to get to your question, fast forward about 7 months later, I was homeless. All my business had collapsed. I was chronically addicted to crystal meth. I was in what they call clinical psychosis. So to use the un-PC expression, I'd gone not completely mad, but I was phasing in and out of some really serious bad mental health.
Having a rough time. Yeah.
Yeah. And right at that moment, as if things couldn't get any more bizarre, I got a job in a nightclub that was run by the 14k in Hong Kong. 14k is one of the ancient traditional triad, fraternal, brotherhood, criminal organizations, right? And 14k is the gang or the triad that runs Wan Chai, which is the red light, gangland, nightclub area in Hong Kong. So I don't know.
And
maybe...
these are the ancient ones. I mean, for some people, this goes right back to thousands of years, this history, and the 14K was one of the central ones, if I'm right, Chris. These are the guys with the tattoos, right?
Yes.
It's not like the Russians, they have stars, but they have a lot of bodily tattoos, right?
Yes, they do. They're famous for it. And so I just want to point out here for your audience, Steve, just so everyone, we're on the same hymn sheet. I was never a triad. I've never claimed to be. I would say I never wanted to be, but the truth was, mate, I was so ill, and I was so almost like what I felt rejected by society. I come from a glowing career in the elite Marines to sitting on my backpack on the Nathan Road in Hong Kong, watching the BMWs and the Mercedes whiz by, and I had nothing, mate. The only thing I had left was a Rolex on my wrist, right, which gave me a stay of execution, right, from the inevitable. The inevitable was like I couldn't stay over there. I was too unwell. I was going to kill myself if I didn't hurt someone else, you know. Albeit...
And it's just for the audience. Look, you know, we've all been there in hard times. Everyone gets lost sometimes. So, you know, you've gone from this glittering career. You know, we can win and lose it 5-6 times in a lifetime, because, right, you know, it goes really bad for you. You're addicted to crystal meth, you know, because of this lifestyle. The mental health, you know, the paranoia, all these effects start kicking in. You know, I mean, it's downhill from then, right? So, you know, you're making bad choices. You're on the street now. You know, you've got a Rolex. I mean, yeah, you feed yourself maybe for a couple of weeks, but you ain't going anywhere with that kind of money. You know, you're stuck in Hong Kong. You need to survive, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I hocked this Rolex. I got £1,000 for it, which wasn't bad because I only paid 1,300 quid a few years earlier, right? I think it was a present to myself in the Marines after I think I served in the Northern Ireland conflict. Then we did our Arctic warfare training up there in the north of Norway, and using the savings, I bought this watch. It wasn't about like being a bling. It was nothing.
No, it's a milestone for achievement. I get that, Chris. Yeah, a reward to yourself. I get that.
It's a quality diver's watch, and I'd fallen in love with them, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, when I was down on my luck, I didn't think twice about hocking it. It's like, what? I didn't want to get sentimental, sell the watch. So I ended up using the money. I put the deposit down on this ancient flat. When I say ancient, it was the top floor of an aging tenement block in the back streets of Wan Chai, so run down old school Hong Kong, right? We're talking like the Bruce Lee films, that kind of, you know.
Not the best address to pivot from then, right?
Well, I loved it, mate. You know, I absolutely loved it, Steve. You know, for me, I was in my own Bruce Lee movie, you know. I used to go up on the roof of this skyscraper and practice kung fu, you know, teach myself kung fu from this book and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, I wandered into this nightclub. In my book, I call it Club Nemo. It's not the real name. I wanted to give myself a degree of separation because I didn't want to piss off the wrong people. But anyone who's, you know, been in Hong Kong or certainly back then probably knows the place I'm talking about. And I went looking for my mate Glenn, who was the doorman there, right? And Glenn wasn't there, so I saw this chap, Chinese, thin black tie, black suit, a bit like Reservoir Dogs sort of look, right? I'm not trying to be romantic. It's just this is how the guy looked. And I went up to him and I said, do you know where Glenn is? And he said, Glenn gone Thailand. Can you do doorman job? I'm like, yeah, I can do doorman job. He said, okay, start here tomorrow night, 8 o'clock.
Just like that. Yeah. Right, you're in. Right, I get it. Right, so what happens? So you turn up, you know, you're in there, right?
Yeah.
Oh, what's it like on the door there? What's the first impressions?
Right, okay, so, I'm just going to like wave my book in the air, mate. This is not trying to sell, well, probably I am trying to sell books because let's be honest, that's what we do, isn't it? But for anyone that really wants to know, I'd encourage you to read Eat and Smoke, right? The reason being, mate, is it's such a convoluted, twisting, turning story.
Yeah.
That to try to do it justice in an hour podcast is
doesn't really do it.
I found in the past is it confuses people more because they only hear one part of it, and then they jump on board of that thinking that's like who I am, or
there's so much to you, Chris. I understand.
Yeah, well,
I understand.
I think I said to you in the first bit of the podcast, I've lived, worked, and travelled, Steve, in 87 countries across all 7 continents. Right, pilot, skydiver, author, graduate of youth work, popular host a popular podcast, driven journalist to India and back, by on a coach, work with street kids in post-war Mozambique. I'm an Antarctic explorer. I've been on expedition to the Antarctic polar circle, right? And I say that because on these podcasts, people listen to something like this. That it just happened, guys. I worked in a club. It was run by organized crime, which is pretty much most nightclubs throughout the world, right? That is no big deal. But people seize on that and they think, oh, that's all this guy is. He thinks
Chris, you're on here. You're on the Legend series. Everyone who comes on here, there are massive names, Chris. From billionaires to high-profile criminals. You've had a very fascinating life, and it's about going into that fascination. Let me just clear that up. Like you've just said, you've been an explorer. You're always around all the elite guys, the SAS, the SBS guys. You've done all that. You've done your own tours. You've travelled to all them countries. You have a fascinating journey. And we have to narrow it in here. But we're going to get you back to do other stuff. But we're really interested as well. Yeah. About what these triads are actually like over there in Hong Kong, Chris.
Yeah. So there I was, right? I've accidentally got myself the job as what I thought was bouncer, right? Because that's the job I'd done in 2 other clubs in Hong Kong, right? Western-owned clubs, this is a Chinese club. It's a different animal, right? And so I rock up there on the first night, and Steve, I was naive. I've been naive like most of my life, right? I'm too fucking nice now, and I don't know if you can be too nice, but you know what I'm trying to say. So I'm stood there, and there was a guy at the bar who was an English expat, and he was over there to work on what was then the new airport, right? That was taken over from the famous Kai Tak. He went, "All right, Chris." I'm like, "Yeah." How do you even know my name? It's like literally, I've just come through the door about 7 minutes ago, right? He's like, "Yeah, they're all triads, right?" Well, my ears went like that, Steve, right? And I tell you why. I had a fascination which almost bordered on like a fixation with these guys, because the notion that these pure-blooded Chinese hard men covered in tattoos, all of them were ninjas with the old kung fu, operated not just below the radar of the law. Well, a lot of them were the law, right? But they operated below society, that they had this fierce allegiance to one another that was more important than, getting chopped up or going to prison or whatever the wrath they might have to suffer, right? That they communicated with sign language and secret code that you and I wouldn't even notice, right?
It's fascinating, isn't it? And the other one is the Yakuza, right? Yeah. In Japan, and they take the fingers off and, Harry Carry and all this. I've always been fascinated with that, especially going back to the samurai. It's important to knit this in because it's a very ancient kind of, not just a philosophy, even a government, a shadowy government going right back through the ages, right? That in many times was, aligned to the royal houses of the time, right? So this is what we're talking about. But tell us a bit about the sign. I mean, didn't you notice, Chris? Because, if you go into a situation like that, wouldn't you have, the movements and all that, thought, well, something about these guys, it seemed kind of lively, right? Did you notice anything?
Yeah. So my 2 doormen, my fellow my two fellow doormen, they're Chinese, right? So I'm an expat, a guilo, foreign devil, or ghost man is what it means, right?
So they call it.
Yeah, that's you, guilo, you know. And one guy was what they call violent hand in Cantonese, which is assassin, right? So he's an assassin. I know, mate. If you think it sounds mental,
let me just say, I don't think it sounds mental at all. You know, the fact is, unfortunately, I've been around killers all my life, and some of them you wouldn't even know. There's just something in human beings that can do that. They're different kind of quality, and there are, you know, a lot of different things that forge people a lot quicker to do things like that. But even when you're out in action, out in the field, you're trained, you know, as a soldier, you're trained to kill people, right?
Yeah.
It's the way of the world, Chris.
Yeah.
Not saying it's right, but it's the way of the world.
Yeah,
it happens. Wars happen.
I just wish I could capture, Steve, the subtle nuances of, like, you know, not just the situation that I found myself in, but what Hong Kong is like, why it's a unique place. You know, when you understand the history, the culture, the superstition, the pride, the fierce, they call it face, right? Which is something, you know, probably in the gangster world, you'd understand it, because gangsters have that fierce thing, don't they? If you cross someone in the underworld.
There's one thing I can say on that I find very, very interesting. And I certainly had it all the way through my life. And I know anyone who's lived that life on the edge, you know, really at that level of extremity, right, for so long. It's like a life of science. It's what's not said is the most important thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it is about science. It's, you know, it's about intuitions, and it's about knowings, you know, and just being able to uncode that and people very, very quickly. And it's on a different level, a different vibration. Normal general people do not have these skills in that way, because they're not in this life and death kind of throes all the time. So it's a survival thing where you have to be like that, you know?
Yeah, I guess what I'm meaning with this guy, his name is Daisu, right? A very tall Chinese guy, unusually tall, right? As you say assassin, you conjure up images of some like ninja. It's not like that, right? This guy he's not the smartest guy in the world. He's probably grown up in poverty in one of the big housing projects in Hong Kong. You've got to remember, this is still a place, mate, where babies are killed if they're not born the right sex, or you know, you want a boy for prosperity, right? A boy that's going to go and do.
But this really goes on still, Chris. I mean, look, I know people have been there. I haven't been there, and we hear this stuff. But you've been there. This actually goes on. You have a understanding of this over there?
I haven't. My story, Stevie, was like 20 odd years ago, right? You know, so I can't really talk for it now, and things change. But you never saw I saw one disabled person in 13 months of living in Hong Kong. One, right? Where are they all, right? They're either hidden behind closed doors in some, you know, some home, or that it's a very different culture, Steve. You know, this is it's impossible. It's impossible to really.
I mean, let me come in. There's one story that might help us. You know, tell me if this is true, Chris. But you know, I mean, they're up there, corporal punishment at the top of the list, even above the US, right? And I heard that if they execute someone over there, criminal or whatever, they've been found guilty, right? They make the family pay for the bullets. Is this right?
I don't know about something as unique as that. What I can tell you is obviously Hong Kong is still under the 50-year buffer agreement, right? So they can't change. They can't change British law for 50 years, right? Although they're having a bloody good go at it, right?
Yeah.
But on the mainland,
it's communist, right?
On the mainland, you've got children crippled and laid in begging bowls, you know, doped up on Valium. Right. This is back then, Steve. I haven't been on. Well, I was in Beijing about 9 years ago now. That's the last time I was there, right? But I'm talking back in the day. So in the 90s, if you were a tourist in China, you'd see the Valium baby, which is where the gangs rent babies from people, you know, probably impoverished, illiterate peasant people, dope it full of Valium. So when they stick it over their shoulder, it's there for the day, right? You know, there's no hassle from it. And then they run after anybody that looks like they might give them money in the cities. So you'd be walking through a city and suddenly you look over, there's 10 women, all with a baby on their shoulder, running after you like this, right? It gets worse, where they used to chain the toddlers to the fence, or, like I say, cripple their legs so that they just laid in a begging bowl all day, right? Friend of mine was on a train in somewhere in China. It doesn't really matter where, does it? The police rushed on board, dragged off a suspected pickpocket, right? Dragged him off, executed him on the platform in front of the whole train, right? I'm not saying this as a judgment call. I'm saying now you understand when I'm trying to describe my assassin guy, why that's just quite normal.
Life is cheap. Yeah, life is cheap there. No, we've got, you know, it's important to paint the picture of the environment, you know, for those who don't really get it. And yes, life is cheap there, Chris, right? You know,
yeah.
I mean, look, in this nightclub, as you know, as you got into knowing these people a little bit more and you got integrated, was you brought more into the fold? I mean, I know this is somewhere where you'd probably never, ever be allowed to go. But, I mean, was you brought in a bit? How did that go?
Right. So as a foreigner, right, or even a Hong Kong Chinese, if you've been overseas, they don't trust you at all, right? You're obviously never going to be allowed to become a pure-blooded triad. It's just not how it works, right? Plus, they wouldn't, you know, they have a healthy kind of distrust. But what they used to do is triads will work with anyone if they think they can make a buck out of it. So I have people suggest that I should start dealing on the door of the club, that the boss would kind of sort me out with, you know, sort me out with the gear and this kind of stuff. There was always like an unwritten option. If you wanted to smuggle gold or diamonds for the triads, you could do that. And they used to they take you away, kit you up with like a hidden vest that you wore under your clothes, you know, full of gold bullion or whatever. Then they'd fly you out through airports where they had an agreement with so like Nepal for some reason was a, you know, you'd stop in Nepal on and then you might fly on to, say, Japan, where the gold was worth an awful lot more this sort of stuff, right? There was all those kind of stuff. There was also something called the Foreign Triad, which I've only ever been able to find writing about once, but which I thought I could see all the time in this nightclub, right? I used to just wonder why there were so many Westerners, plus Filipinos and Indians and other expats, right? But like in the club being like really pally with the triads, it like I didn't get it, right? None of them seemed to do much work for a living, and Hong Kong's an expensive place to live. And it wasn't until I was writing my book, Eating Smoke, that I came across an article that was written about the Foreign Triad, right? Basically a group of foreigners, you know, expats that had formed their own triad, right? They even had like some initiation tattoo and this kind of stuff, right? very confusing, Steve, because I've subsequently spoken to people that lived in Hong Kong a long time, and they gone, no, Chris, never heard of it. But like I said, there was an article written about it by a guy called Bill Sparrow, who used to write for I think it's called the Asia Gazette or the Asia Sex Gazette or some publication. And he'd written this whole article about meeting a girl, a Filipina, that had been in the foreign triad, right? So that's that. As far as my involvement, what really fed my ego was in the mornings when we'd all finish work. So the club would shut, I think it's around about 7 o'clock in the morning. So obviously stay open all night. In the morning, it'd be, Quissa. Don't know why they all call me Quissa, right? Quissa, you want to come to breakfast? And that was it. The family, as I thought of them. So all the gangsters in this club, because they were all like either Triad members or affiliated with the Triad, right? They take me for breakfast, Steve, to one of the plush restaurants. And like, you got to remember, I've been homeless, living on my backpack, right? Basically scum of the universe with a mega drug problem and in psychosis, lost all my military career, all that's history now, right? Now, I'm walking down the main street, the main pavement in Wan Chai with the most infamous guy in, one of the
in that area. So, it's fair to say, Chris, you're on the way back up now, right?
Well,
maybe not the route, the ideal route, but certainly from where you was, right?
I felt like I belonged, Steve,
and this is important for human beings, right? So, I get that.
I felt, like the two guys I work with, one's an assassin, the other's a hard as fuck street fighter, right? And they're the guys I work with, right? One of them didn't particularly like me, so it's kind of funny. But if anything kicked off in the club,
you'd be together.
Like one time, I just jumped in and started like mixing it up with this guy, right? Who a fucking Western knobhead, right? Jesus Christ! All the bar staff, mate. Before you can say Jack Robinson, they're jumping over the bar. They're grabbing ashtrays, ice tongs, and they're there to fight it out with you, right? Because you are one of them, right? No, I was never a triad. Let's just keep that clear, right? But loyalty, innit, right?
Look, I'm laughing. I'm laughing, Chris, because I just had a memory of mine now where someone kind of upset. I think it done something, give me a slap or something. One of my younger family, this is years back, right in the East End. So when I heard, of course, I've gone round there. They fucking what? So I go round there, right, all Chinese. So go straight now, go right, out of you. Was it him? Yeah, right out of come. Anyway, he's come out. So like, they've all got the big swords in that. All right then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
One or two, that's fine, because I'd come prepared anyway. I didn't come. But all of a sudden, Chris, they come from everywhere, mate. They was like rats. They come from, it was like they was shimmying down the drain pipe. It's just all these people appeared. I thought, fucking hell. It was like 20 of them. And I had to say, and I had to change tack, didn't I? Now they're giving it the large rub of all the choppers and all that. I had to think, well, I have to light thingy bomb, but I'll come back, right, again, right? But this is what they're like. There's one thing about them. They're all like there, right? So if there's any egg, it's not one. All of a sudden, you've got 40 of them, right? And they just appear, yeah?
Yeah, when there was a famous incident on the Lockhart Road in Hong Kong where two triads clashed over protection rights to one of the restaurants there. And 200 triads turned up to fight it out in the street, right? Called the Battle of Wan Chai or something. It's still talked about to this day. But yeah, it was so going for breakfast with these guys was fascinating. I made the stupid mistake, being English, is I turned to the Dilo, so the guy that gave me the job. Dilo means big brother, so the gang leader, right, of this part of Wan Chai. And he was called Paul. I said, Paul, can I give you some money, right? Now, he just looked at me and went, like that, right? The guy, this is to try to explain the difference in culture. The little lad next to me, who was the barman, just went, Quizzer, you think Paul don't have money, right? Do you see the difference in culture there?
Yeah.
I'm trying to be British politeness.
But they take that as a slight.
Chinese
as if, what do you think? I haven't got no money to pay for stuff.
Yeah, Chinese culture is no. Confucius says, boss looks after his staff, right? That's just unwritten law. The boss looks after his staff. In return, staff respect boss, right?
Yeah.
So me offering to like go halves on the meal or whatever, which I thought I was being polite, they all think I'm being rude. So it, you know, it's just silly stuff like that.
So look, what? Tell us. I found that in business too, Chris, and I've learned with different, just little stuff, right? It's just politeness to do a little bit of research about etiquette, right? But look, what is the most violent thing then you see there? You must see loads of stuff.
Good question.
Erupt at that door with all them lot. What was the worst thing you see?
Okay. The worst thing I saw in Hong Kong was the chopping, right? I never saw it myself, Steve, but my fellow doorman, name begins with S. If anyone knows who I'm talking about, I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants to be featured on a podcast, but he was on the door of his club. Like me, doing same job as me. Transit van pulled up. X amount of lads, I say 9 lads, piled out the back with the meat cleavers, and they just began to chop the geezer up, right? He put his hand up to protect himself, and he'd cut his thumb off. It was like hanging down his wrist. His face looked like he'd slammed into a wire fence at like 100 miles an hour, right? I'm talking about the scars afterwards. Apparently, he'd either said the wrong thing to someone, and you just don't do that in Hong. You know, you don't do that in Hong Kong. You certainly don't do it in Triad culture. It's just not worth. They're never going to forget it, right? Not like here where, you know, we gob off, we don't really do anything or whatever, or you have a grudge and after 10 years you've forgotten about. No, there it's anyway. So that was that guy. There was a newspaper article, mother and baby on top of a skyscraper, ditched in like a stairwell, both chopped to bits, right? Triad revenge. Horrible, mate, you know. And back then over there, this would make front page of the Chinese newspapers, right? There was no censorship, right? But bringing it back to me, so there were a couple of incidents. I'm standing on the door one night. I'm in the footwell, so down the bottom of the stairs, and I'm looking up the steps, wondering, you know, which punters are going to come into the club next. The Chu Chai, who was the street fighter, he's also in the stairwell, looking up the stairs. It's what we did a lot, you know, when you worked on the door, you stand there wondering who's going to come along next, right? Well, that's what we're doing. Anyway, I happened to glance into the club, and it was like, Daisu, this 6'3" or whatever assassin dude, is running at the door with a guy over his shoulder, right? This seedy looking middle-aged chap, you know, I was quite young. I was 25 back then, right? This seedy like middle-aged chap, Chu Chai still hasn't seen. And as Daisu enters the stairwell, I spread eagle myself against the wall, right? Because this is Triad business, right? Westerners, you know, don't get involved in Chinese business. Let them do that, right? It's nothing to do with you. And so Daisu comes in, gets this guy and goes, ugh! Like this animal grunt, chucks him on the floor of the stairwell. At that same moment, Chu Chai goes, right? And the two of them, mate, set about kicking the fuck out of this guy like two Millwall hooligans. It was like they couldn't kick him hard enough and fast enough, you know? When you've seen that level of anger, well, it's one thing getting in a fight and kicking someone and hitting them and, you know, even like stamping on them, right?
Yeah, but the levels of violence, yeah.
It's another thing to be doing that, but doing it so fast because you hate this person so much, right?
Yeah.
It was quite something to see, Steve, right? What happened is, after they've been kicking him in the head about 10 times each, the guy like recovered himself and he just made a beeline between them and ran up these stairs, right? And as they went to chase after him, neither of them saw this little bit of paper drop from his hand. And I saw it, it was on the stair. So I just waited until that they disappeared into the club. I picked it up. It's a list of racehorses, right? So he'd obviously he'd been
running
in
the numbers.
Yeah, he was probably
the gambling, running the numbers, yeah, and
he was probably affiliated to another triad.
Yeah.
He was doing business on their territory. He shouldn't have been doing that, right? So I saw that. I saw two young magi, which means little horse, which are triad runners, right? Attempting to stab themselves to death with mobile phones, right? This is in the early days of like the old Nokias, right? I didn't even have a phone for another 5 years after that, right? But all the Chinese, because of the technology coming over the border from the mainland, they all had the latest phones and stuff, right? The rest, we had pages, Steve, funny enough, all the expats.
Yeah, I remember the pages as well, like for a long time.
They
were safer, Chris.
We all carried pages because in Hong Kong, phone calls are free. So long as you got a pager, someone pages you. Oh, Mr. Chris, Mr. Ronald is trying to get hold of you. Oh, cool. You just go to the nearest phone in any restaurant or shop, which is free, and you call your mate back. So it was a good old system.
Chris, I'll tell you what, it's really fascinating hearing them stories about over there in Hong Kong. I know you've got so many, and I know we're only touching on a little part of it here, of your stories. Absolutely fascinating. We're going to get you back on, and we're going to go through a lot more stuff. But look, for a last question, what happened when you come out of there? Just how did your life go when you left that situation in Hong Kong? What, did you come back to the UK? And what happened to you then?
I came back. I spent another 18 months in what I call the wilderness, mate, right? Basically banging up amphetamine to survive. I couldn't get out of bed. Well, I never went to bed for 18 months. I slept on a shitty sofa bed in my front room in a sleeping bag that I nicked off a heroin dealer. It got really, really dark. I've written a book about it called 40 Nights. It's actually a funny book, but it was a dark time. And then, mate, I had my epiphany, right? Because everything's for a reason, right? As long as we hang in there, everything's for a reason. And I got it, mate. And suddenly, literally like that, I got it. I saw the path I'd been taken in life. I saw where it had led me. I understood why I'd followed it, and I'd done this to, put myself in this pain cave. And I saw the path out of it. And from that moment, my enlightenment, I suppose you could call it, my life's, just been the best ever. I can rock and roll, I rock and roll with it, mate. I think when you're young, your life is like that, right? It's either got to be good or it's really now I just cruise through in paradise, Steve, you know. So I feel very fortunate to have had the experiences I've had, is what I'm trying to say.
Chris, look, you know, we're going to go into this unbelievable roller coaster of a life. We're going to now go in just after into your all-time top 9 life and business lessons that you've learned throughout this unbelievable, fascinating, tumultuous journey. But Chris, let me just say, you know, you've had a fascinating life. And I always say on here, right, everyone who comes on here has a real fascinating journey. And it's about going in to uncode that, the highs and the lows, you know, and it's about, there's no real light unless you've understood the darkness. Right, Chris? So look, thanks for a wonderful podcast, and thank you for coming on The Big Shift, Chris.
My pleasure, mate.
Thanks for tuning in, guys, to a wonderful new segment of The Big Shift with Stephen Gillen. Make sure to subscribe, like, go into stephengillen.com and sign up for more wonderful content to expedite, help, and support you on your own personal journey of success.